Since he was wearing that set of full plate armor, it should have come with a helmet that could cover his entire face. If that was the case, he wants us to see his face. He wants us to identify him as Philip. Why woo? Christopher was suddenly reminded of the existence of illusion magic. That's it. It's an illusion. Someone's trying to frame Philip so they faked his appearance. Maybe those villagers aren't villagers after all. He had managed to deduce it perfectly. Then. So you're saying, you're robbing us specifically because we're carrying the Sorcerer's Kingdom's grain. Is that correct? Or, patron, what's wrong? The mercenary leader who had been standing beside him asked with a perplexed expression. That was to be expected. He had expected an order to kill, so Christopher must have appeared to him like a madman. That's right. We'll be using these grains efficiently. The man, who was purportedly Philip, replied with pride. He's talking like a retard. The man pretending to be him must also be thinking why he'd have to say something so dumb. But could this be a pre-prepared script? But why? Christopher's first thought was of the rival organizations the mercenary leader had mentioned in their previous conversation. His next thought was of the leaders of the Eight Fingers. If it was the former, they had to get away from this place immediately. The Eight Fingers handed out the most ruthless punishments for those who had betrayed them, followed by those who had failed a job they had given to them. If the former was the case, then their opponents must have enough numbers to defeat Christopher's security detail. But even if they're just wearing disguises or whatever, Christopher couldn't think of a reason why there would be shovel-wielding villagers. Now that he thought about it, the latter felt more natural. If that was the case, then they're dealing with something truly troublesome, something extremely troublesome. This could imply that the leaders of the Eight Fingers were not as united as previously thought, and were still attempting to sabotage each other. Or, was this the will of all of the leaders? Are we being thrown away? Are they trying to push the crime of killing Philip, a noble of the kingdom, onto me? His actual body might have already been dealt with. If that was the case, what would their next best move be? Hey, patron. What are we doing? Are you scared? You know that we can easily fight off someone like him, right? Though that noble-looking nutjob has some pretty impressive armor, he doesn't seem to have the skills to match. The mercenary leader spoke in a hushed tone. This wasn't the time for that. He shouldn't be interrupting Christopher's thoughts. Hold on. Just wait for a minute. Their problem wasn't going away. If they were pushing the job to kill Philip onto him, why didn't they mention it before? Had they told Christopher in advance, he wouldn't have to worry as much. He would have just taken care of that man as if he was just a normal bandit. So was their plan to make it out to be that a Sorcerer's Kingdom's caravan had killed one of the kingdom's nobles, and bring the nations to the brink of war? This thought made Christopher uncontrollably tilt his head. As the situation stands, it was more like a merchant of the kingdom, killing one of its nobles in self-defense. It would be hard to force a war on these conditions. Of course, Christopher, as someone who had deep connections to the criminal underworld, knew full well that many people wouldn't think twice about doing something, as long as they had a reason prepared. There were also people who would kill for the simplest slight, but it was hard to imagine a country being this impulsive. Then there's only one possibility left. The top brass had decided on this already, but the word never got to me, so it's just a misunderstanding. After all, there would be no way they thought that it was possible for them to kill us all right now, and not have news of it spread all over the place. Careless mistakes being made was a tale as old as time, so it wasn't as though that was an unreasonable assumption. What would be his best move from this point onward? If he was to take independent actions, there was a chance that he would be taken care of. If he wanted to avoid that kind of situation, he should have an excuse for himself. At the very least, he should act in a way that makes it possible to shift responsibility to someone else. Killing that Philip guy would be the worst option. Once he's dead, we can't bring him back, and it would probably anger Signius Sama. If that's the case. Leave the cargo, leave this place. If we did that, he wouldn't chase us, would he? Ha. Christopher tried his best to ignore the perplexed sounds coming out of the mercenary leader's mouth. Of course. I do not intend to harm the merchants of the kingdom. Even if it isn't directly, you're still harming me. Though those were his hate-filled thoughts, Christopher did not let it show on his face. Oi. Are you for real? Are you being serious right now? What's going on? What's happening? Are you under a spell? Or do you see an entire army I'm not seeing right now? This is an order from your patron. Prepare for a fuller treat. The mercenary leader rolled his eyes and got quiet for a moment. Perhaps he was considering the possibility that Christopher was under a spell, his own opinions, and his future. After a while, with an expression that said he couldn't accept any of this, he said, I understand. The mercenaries covered for Christopher as they backed away. He was allowing the grain to be taken away, but he knew the exact quantity and what exactly was in the cargo. If worst comes to worst, he could always repurchase the cargo and send it to the Holy Kingdom. They wouldn't be so picky as to only want this exact caravan of grain, right? Though he would have to apologize to the maritime merchant who was waiting on him, it was imperative for him to return to the capital to ask Signius-sama about this. Christopher knew from the depth of his heart that there was no easy way out of this situation. Was it because the merchants knew which side was in the right? They backed off without even unsheathing their swords. There were numerous wagons as their spoils of war. He had taken a look inside. They were all filled with barrels and crates, each filled to the brim with grain. Though it was all the types of grain that was easy to store and were by no means fresh, they should be safe for consumption. It was disappointing how it was just food. Philip wanted to take something as a trophy to commemorate his great achievement, but grain couldn't fulfill that purpose. If only there were sets of armor or swords in here, I could take one as a souvenir, so I really should have asked those men to leave their weapons behind, huh? Philip looked over the cargo wagons that were his prize. The horses had been taken away already, so they did not have a way to move them. Of course, Philip had ordered them to leave the horses, but someone who looked like he led the mercenary group had refused his order. He even shot an arrow into the tree next to Philip back then. Though Philip hated his guts, he had no other option but to back down. I have my full plate armor, so I should be fine, but these soldiers aren't in the same boat as I am. Ah, how merciful am I to forfeit my own gains out of consideration for these people. Though, considering how everything had gone so well, not a single injury and not a single drop of blood spilled, I wanted to keep that up till the end. Philip surveyed his spoils, and his gaze fell upon the flag of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Oh, I can keep this as a souvenir. The first to capture the Sorcerer's Kingdom's flag, the country that had defeated the kingdom's 200,000 strong army in battle, is me. Yumu, Philip nodded his head. Though he wanted to hide his joy, he couldn't help but smile. A perfect conclusion suited him the best, as he thought, he was truly someone with exceptional abilities. This made him extremely happy. In front of him were the excellent fruits of his labor. Since there were multiple flags around, it should be fine if he did it to one of them right. After finishing that thought, Philip dropped the flag and began to stomp on it. The image of the Sorcerer's Kingdom's flag being defiled with dirt filled his heart with excitement. This wasn't something anyone else in the kingdom could accomplish. That's right, Philip had accomplished what no other man could. Look at that. I'm not a good-for-nothing after all. Compared to brother, compared to father, compared to everyone else in the kingdom, I'm truly the greatest. Ah, my lord. Can we really take these? Or is it better to leave them where they stand? One of the villagers checking the wagons asked timidly. With his excitement curbed, Philip asked without masking his emotions. What are you talking about? No, you see, when those who ran away come back here with soldiers. What do you mean? You think it would be better if we killed those merchants? No, I didn't mean that. Killing them would have been unnecessary. Then what are you trying to say? My lord. What should we do about these? If we can take them back, how do we do that? The other villagers chimed in. It was what was bothering Philip as well. What should we do? Even if he forced all 50 of them to carry it back all on their backs, it still wouldn't be enough to move all of their spoils back. The carriages themselves were also of high quality, so they could probably fetch a fair price, or Philip could just use them. But, with the manpower he has on hand, moving these back wouldn't be an easy task. It would be heavy, grueling physical labor. Right as Philip was agonizing over the matter, he heard the sound of people running on grass. Upon looking at the source of the sound, he saw the silhouettes of two masked men. Philip Kaka. It was Wayne's voice, but his equipment looked completely different from before. The dirty leather armor he had on was now replaced by a sturdy chest plate. He had a sword by his waist too. Why would he change his equipment? Philip felt doubt in his heart, but the feeling of excitement over the result of this operation was much stronger, and thus overrode it. Hey, you two. Come over here, look at our hull. What happened? Wayne stood still, surveyed his surroundings, and spoke with an incredulous tone, as if the cargo wagons being there was a strange sight to behold. Outside of regular combat and raids, once he considered that, Philip understood what questions Wayne had in mind. As if to affirm Philip's thoughts, Igor opened his mouth to ask. Exactly. Looks like none of Philip Kaka's soldiers have been harmed. The ground looks fine, the air looks fine, not even a whiff of blood. What kind of tactic did you employ? Did you have on your person any special magical items? If only he had any arcane talents, but that wasn't what Igor was talking about, was he? None of that. After all, I've gathered a great number of men. The enemy simply did not want to fight to their deaths, I think. The two of them turned to face each other, but because both of them had their faces obscured, he couldn't see what their expressions were like. Now then, how should we split this? If he was being honest, the spoils of war in front of them were there entirely because of Philip's actions. It did irritate him somewhat that he had to split the prize with two people who had just been standing far back as spectators. However, if Philip were to take it all for himself, they would surely be unhappy too. After all, they also had to mobilize the villagers in their domains. 80% of the spoils should go to Philip, those two can take the rest of it. To take a tenth of the spoils each just for mobilizing some villagers, there'd be no way they would want more, right? Ah, no need to worry about that. It doesn't sit right with us if we were to take a portion of the spoils without doing anything at all. Please, Philip Kaka, you should take it all. I trust that there aren't any objections. That's right, Philip Kaka should take it all, including the cargo wagons. Even someone like Philip would feel guilty to take it all after hearing such cordial words. Though they did say their villages were too small so Philip couldn't stay there, the fact that they had set up camps near the forest and had prepared food for him meant that those favors must be repaid. Nonsense, nonsense. Aren't we partners? I would have to leave some of the spoils behind anyways, please feel free to use them. No, we have more than enough, Philip Kaka. Wayne replied without hesitation, not a single shred of doubt was present in his answer. These were all earned through Philip Kaka's efforts. As the etiquette of the nobility would dictate, we cannot accept these. Is that true? Yes, both of them answered simultaneously. They seemed to possess an unyielding will on this matter, so there was nothing he could do about it. This is all mine. Philip's heart fluttered at that thought. Since it has come down to this, I'll take it all. Also, though I'm embarrassed to ask, I do have a request for you too. Could I borrow some horses to pull these wagons? Horses? What should we do? We'll discuss this privately for a second, please excuse us. The two who had temporarily left his presence seemed to be exchanging their opinions, but from this distance, it was hard to tell if they were talking at all. They seemed to reach an agreement after a while and promptly returned to Philip. We'll prepare the horses as soon as possible. However, because these aren't war horses but workhorses, could you return them shortly after you're done with them? Thank you very much. An important thing to note, it would probably be best to lower the flags of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. You wouldn't want to be seen by regular folks while transporting your spoils back, so though it will be difficult, please consider transporting them through the forest. Understood, I'll do that then. The two strode away as soon as they were done talking. Soon their silhouettes could no longer be seen in the forest. Philip surveyed the cargo wagons again. This was proof of his victory. They were as bright as his future. On the other hand, that which now rests underneath Philip's foot, the dirt-ridden flag of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, was a representation of that country's eventual downfall.